Now let's talk about the properties of a parallel circuit. Here's an example of a parallel circuit. As you can see, when the current leaves the battery, it doesn't stop, but comes to a junction point. At the junction point, the current split. The current splits and travels into two different pathways. They meet again at the junction point, and then proceed and return to the battery. This is a parallel circuit. Because the current splits, the total current is not equal to the individual current through each pathway. In fact, the total current equals the sum of the individual currents through each pathway. IT equals I1 plus I2 plus, depending on how many currents you have, or pathways you have. What's important to note is that the current at this point equals the current at this point. These are junction points. And this is because the current going into the junction point will split, but eventually it will meet up again at the second junction point. The voltage for the different pathways are the same. This is because since each pathway only has one resistor, the voltage of the current will drop completely through each pathway. Now, to find the equivalent resistance in a parallel circuit, you will have to take the inverse of the sum of the inverses of each resistor. 1 over R plus 1 over R2 plus 1 over R3, etc. Remember to add them and take the inverse. If you don't, you won't get the equivalent resistance. Important things to know about parallel circuits is that opening a new path will actually drain the battery quicker. It does not change the currents of the other paths, but will change the total current coming out of the battery. This is also why using parallel circuits can be disadvantageous. Anyways, a disadvantage is that it will drain the battery pretty quickly because there's so many pathways and so many currents from one battery. Positive note is that if you break the pathway of one resistor, if you break the current of one resistor in one pathway, it will not affect the current in the other pathway. So if you have, going back to the Christmas lights example, if you have Christmas lights in a parallel circuit, breaking one of the light bulbs will not destroy the other light bulbs because the currents of the different pathways do not affect each other. Next, we'll talk about combined circuits.